Random House Audio presents The Princes of Ireland, The Dublin Saga, by Edward Rutherfurd. Read for you by John Keating. Long ago, long before St. Patrick came, before the coming of the Celtic tribes, before the Gaelic language was spoken, at the time of Irish gods who have not even left their names. So little can be said with certainty, yet evidence of their presence remains, and as people have done since tales were told, we may imagine. Dawn. The midwinter sky was already a clear, pale azure. Very soon the sun would arise from the sea. Already, seen from the island's eastern coast, there was a golden shimmering along the horizon. It was the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. The island was actually one of a pair that lay just off the Atlantic edge of the European mainland. Once, thousands of years before, in the great white stasis of the last ice age, they had been joined to each other by a stone causeway that ran from the northeastern corner of the smaller western island across to the upper part of its neighbour, which in turn was joined in the south by a chalky land bridge to the continental mainland. At the ending of the ice age, however, when the waters from the melting Arctic came flooding down the world, they covered over the stone causeway, then smashed through the chalk bridge, thus creating two islands in the sea. The western island was mostly covered with thick forest, interspersed with areas of bog. Here and there, handsome mountain ranges arose. The land had many rivers, rich in salmon and other fish. But to those who first came there, two other features of the landscape would in particular have been remarked upon. The first was mineral. Here and there, in clearings in the dense forest or upon the open mountainsides, outcrops of rock appeared, forced up from the bowels of the earth, which contained a magical glint of quartz. And in some of these glittering rocks there were deeper veins of gold. The second was universal. Whether it was the dampness of the wind sweeping in from the Atlantic, or the gentle warmth of the Gulf Stream, or the way the light fell at that latitude, or some confluence of these and other factors, there was in the island's vegetation an extraordinary emerald green found nowhere else. And perhaps it was this ancient combination of emerald green and flowing gold that gave the western island its reputation as a place where magical spirits dwelt. And what men dwelt upon the Emerald Island? Before the Celtic tribes of later times, the names of the people who had arrived there belong only to legend. The descendants of Cesar, Partholon, Nemed, the Fir-Bolg and the Tuatha-Dé-Danann. But whether these were actual men or the names of their ancient gods, or both, it is hard to say. There were hunters in Ireland after the Ice Age, then farmers. They knew how to build with stone and make weapons of bronze and fashion handsome pottery. They traded, too, with merchants who came from even such faraway places as Greece. Above all, they made ornaments from the island's plenteous gold. Ornaments for the neck, bracelets of golden twist, earrings, sun discs of hammered gold. The Irish goldsmiths surpassed most others in Europe. Craftsmen magicians, they might be called. Now the sun was breaking over the horizon, sending a burning, golden flash across the sea. And as the sun's rays hurtled over the bay's northern headland and across the plain beyond, it encountered an answering flash, as though upon the ground there lay a great cosmic reflector. The flash emanated from a large and remarkable object that was made by the hand of man. About 25 miles to the north of the bay, and flowing west to east, there lay another fine river. It ran through a valley whose lush, green land contained some of the richest soil on earth. And it was on the gently sloping ridge on the northern bank of this river that the people of the island had built several large and impressive structures, the chief of which had just sent the dazzling flash into the sky. They were huge, circular grassy mounds. Their bases were set with monumental stones whose surfaces were incised with designs, circles, zigzags, and strange hallucinatory spirals. But most striking of all was that the whole surface towards the rising sun was faced with white quartz. and it was this huge, curving, crystalline wall which now sparkled and flashed a reflected solar fire back into the sky on that clear midwinter dawning. Who built these monuments above the quiet, swan-glided waters of the river? We cannot be sure. And for what had they constructed them? As resting places for their princes, that is known. However, these great mounds were also sanctuaries which at certain times were to receive the divine and mysterious forces of the universe that brought cosmic life to the land. And it was for this reason that the door to the sanctuary had been opened. For in the center of the flashing quartz facade there was a narrow entrance, flanked by monumental stones, behind which a thin, somewhat uneven, but straight passageway, lined with standing stones, led into the heart of the great mound, ending in a trefoil inner chamber. Within the passage and chamber, as outside, many of the stones were inscribed with patterns, including a strange set of 3 swirling spirals. And the narrow passage was oriented so that precisely on the dawn of the winter solstice, the face of the rising sun as it broke over the horizon would penetrate directly through the top of the doorway and send its warm rays along the dark passage into the center. Up in the sky now, the sunbeams flashed. Over the bay, over the island's coastline, across the winter forests and little clearings. Over the river valley the sunbeams flew, towards the mound whose flashing quartz, picking up a reflected light from the green landscape all around, seemed itself to be on fire now, shining like an emerald sun. But now a wonderful thing occurred. For such was the cunning construction of the passage, that as the sun gradually rose, the sun's beams slowly and softly stole along the passage, no faster than a creeping child, foot by foot, bringing a gentle glow to the stones as they went, until they reached the triple chamber of the heart. And there, gathering speed once more, they flashed off the stones, dancing this way and that, bringing light and warmth and life to the midwinter tomb. 430 A.D. Lunasa, high summer. It would be harvest season soon. Deirdre stood by the rail and surveyed the scene. It should have been a cheerful day, but it brought only anguish to her. For the father she loved and the one-eyed man were going to sell her, and there was nothing she could do. The great festival of Lunasa was held at Carman once every 3 years. In a land of wild forest and bog, Carman was a huge, open, grassy space that stretched, green and empty, halfway to the horizon. The place was absolutely flat, except here and there for mounds in which ancestral chiefs were buried. The festival lasted a week. There were areas reserved for food and livestock markets and another where fine clothes were sold. But the most important quarter was where a large racetrack was laid out on the bare turf. People were encamped all around, in tents or temporary huts, whole clans together. Men and women both were dressed in their brilliant cloaks of scarlet, blue or green. The men wore the splendid gold torques, like thick amulets, round their necks. The women sported all kinds of ornaments and bracelets. Some men were tattooed, some had long flowing hair and mustaches, others had their hair caked with clay and raised into terrifying warlike spikes. The horses were in pens. There were campfires where the bards would tell tales. A group of jugglers and acrobats was just arriving. Here and there the sound of a harp, a bone whistle, or a bagpipe could be heard in the summer air, and the scent of roasting meat and honey cakes seemed to mingle in the light smoke that drifted across the scene. And on a ceremonial mound by the racetrack, presiding over the scene, was the King of Leinster. There were 4 parts of the island. To the north lay the territories of the ancient tribes of Ullid, the province of warriors. To the west lay a lovely province of magical lakes and wild coasts, the land of the Druids, they called it. To the south, the province of Muma, renowned for its music. It was there, according to legend, that the sons of Mil had first met the goddess Eru.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?